The porcelain plate did not just fall. It exploded against the polished floor of the grand dining hall inside the Dragomir estate, overlooking the black waters of Valderin Harbor. 7-year-old Viorel Dragomir stood on a velvet chair, his small hand still stretched forward from where he had shoved it. The waitress had not moved fast enough. Soup soaked into the hem of her faded skirt. Guests froze. No one breathed. Even grown men, twice the boy's size, looked at him with quiet fear. Because he was not just a child. He was the only son of Dacian Dragomir, the most feared man in the city. Viral's gray eyes were cold in a face still round with youth. "Clean it," he demanded. His voice tried to sound like his father's, sharp, commanding. The waitress slowly lifted her chin instead. Her name was Mirela Anku. She was 24, poor, exhausted, and very aware that one wrong move could cost her everything. But when she looked at the boy, she did not see a monster. She saw a lonely child hiding inside a giant shadow. She crouched to his height instead of bowing. That alone sent murmurs through the room. No one lowered themselves to Viral's level. They lowered themselves beneath him. "You broke it," she said gently, "so you will help me clean it." Gasps spread like spilled oil. A guard near the doorway shifted, waiting for an order. Viral's cheeks burned. No one told him what to do. Ever. He raised his hand as if to slap the tray from hers again. Before we continue, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France. I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. Mirela caught his wrist midair. Not harsh, not cruel, just firm. The entire hall felt like it tilted. "We do not hurt people because we are upset," she said softly. "That is not strength." Her words were calm, but they struck deeper than shouting. Viral blinked. No trembling, no apology. No fear in her eyes. Only steady disappointment. Something unfamiliar tightened in his chest. From the balcony above, Dacian Dragomir watched without moving. His dark suit blended with shadow. He had expected screaming, begging, perhaps tears. Instead, this waitress held his son's wrist like a teacher correcting a student. The boy pulled free, confused more than angry. "I am Dragomir," Viorel snapped, his small voice echoing too loudly. Mirela nodded once. "And that means you must be better than this." Silence followed. Heavy. Electric. Dacian felt something shift inside him. For years, servants had spoiled the boy to avoid punishment. Teachers resigned. Nannies quit. No one dared discipline him. Now a poor girl in worn shoes had done it without raising her voice. Viorel stared at the broken porcelain, then at her. His eyes glistened, not with rage, but something closer to shame. Mirela handed him a cloth. "We fix what we break." The boy hesitated. Then slowly, awkwardly, he knelt. Dacian stepped forward at last. The sound of his shoes against marble silenced even the air. Mirela stood expecting dismissal. Instead, the feared Mafia boss looked at his son wiping soup from the floor. Then he looked at her. Not with fury, with curiosity. "What is your name?" he asked. His voice was deep, controlled, dangerous. "Mirela Anku," she replied. Her heart pounded, but her chin stayed lifted. Viorel avoided his father's gaze. For the first time, he felt small, in a way that did not come from fear. Dacian studied the waitress a moment longer. Something had changed tonight. Not just in his son, in him. And neither of them yet understood how deeply this single act would alter all their lives. 3 months before the broken plate shattered across marble, Mirela Anku stood outside the iron gates of the Dragomir estate for the first time. The sea wind from Valderin Harbor whipped her thin coat against her legs. She had never seen walls so tall, or guards so still. Her mother's cough had grown worse that winter, and medicine cost more than hope. Mirela had taken 2 buses from the South District. Clutching a folded paper, that confirmed she was hired as temporary banquet staff. She told herself she would only stay 1 season, just long enough to pay debts, just long enough to keep her brothers in school. She did not expect to meet the boy everyone whispered about, the child who made grown men nervous, the son of Dacian Dragomir. Inside the estate, gold lights spilled from chandeliers like honey. Everything smelled of polished wood and power. The head steward warned the staff, in a quiet but firm tone, "You will never contradict the boy. You will never correct him. If he wants the sky lowered, you lower it." The others nodded quickly. Mirela nodded too, but something inside her resisted. She had raised 3 younger brothers after their father abandoned them. She knew what happened when children were never told no. They grew loud, then lost, then cruel. She promised herself she would keep her head down. Just serve, just survive. But the first time she saw Viorel Dragomir, she forgot that promise. He was smaller than she expected. 7 years old, with storm gray eyes too serious for his face. He sat at the end of a long dining table while adults laughed around him. No one spoke to him directly. They praised him loudly like one praises a prince. Such a strong young man. Already like his father. The boy responded by pushing his glass away so hard that juice splashed onto a servant's sleeve. No apology. The servant only bowed lower. Mirela watched from across the hall, carrying a tray of bread. She saw something others ignored. The boy's fingers trembled when no one looked. His shoulders stayed stiff as if bracing for something invisible. Fear followed him, yes, but loneliness followed closer. Later that evening, she passed him alone in a corridor lined with oil paintings of Dragomir ancestors. He was kicking a small silver toy car against the wall, over and over, harder each time. "It will break," she said before she could stop herself. The words slipped out. Viorel turned slowly. Servants usually pretended he did not exist unless summoned. "I can buy another," he replied, lifting his chin. Mirela crouched to pick up the dented car. "Maybe, but some things cannot be replaced." He frowned. That was not the answer he expected. She handed it back without fear. "Take care of what you have." Then she walked away. From a balcony above, Dacian Dragomir had witnessed that small exchange. He had been reviewing shipments, distracted, until he heard the unfamiliar tone in a servant's voice. Calm. Honest. Not shaking. He watched his son stare after the girl instead of shouting at her. It unsettled him more than defiance would have. That night he asked the steward for her name. Mirela Anku, 24. From the South District. No criminal record, supporting family. Dacian told himself he was only ensuring loyalty. But when he closed his office door, he found himself replaying the way she had crouched to meet his son's eyes. Not beneath him. Not above him. Equal. No one had treated Viorel that way before. And Dacian could not decide whether that frightened him or impressed him. The weeks that followed were quiet but charged. Mirela avoided unnecessary attention. She worked fast, spoke little. Yet Viorel began noticing her. When other staff rushed to obey his smallest complaint, she responded only when he asked properly. And the first time he said please, it felt strange in his mouth. She smiled once, small, real. It was not admiration, it was approval. And the boy discovered he wanted that more than fear. Dacian noticed, too, something subtle was changing in his son. The tantrums were shorter, the shouting less sharp, the silence at the table softer. He did not yet know the storm that change would bring, because power does not surrender easily. And not everyone in the Dragomir world welcomed a waitress who dared to reshape the air. The Dragomir estate did not breathe like a normal home. It held its breath. Every hallway felt like it was waiting for orders. Marble floors shone like frozen water. Tall windows faced the dark stretch of Valdrin Harbor, where ships moved like silent ghosts at night. Viorel grew up inside those walls, the way a plant grows inside stone, carefully, quietly, always reaching for light that never quite touched him. His father, Dacian Dragomir, was not a cruel man in public. He was controlled, precise, powerful, but he was distant. He believed love meant protection, and protection meant dominance. He gave his son everything money could buy, except softness. So the boy learned early that fear was safer than feelings. At school, teachers avoided correcting him. Parents whispered when he entered a room. The children either followed him or hid from him. Viorel pretended not to care. He copied his father's posture, his father's sharp tone, his father's steady stare. When he felt confused or small, he pushed someone. When he felt ignored, he broke something. No one stopped him. Until Mirela. She did not flinch. She did not flatter. The first time she calmly removed a dessert plate after he threw it aside and told him he would eat only after asking respectfully, the entire kitchen froze. Viorel had stared at her, waiting for fear to appear. It never did. Instead, she simply waited. That waiting unsettled him more than anger would have. He tested her again the next day, refusing to say thank you. She said nothing. She just did not respond to his request. The silence stretched. The boy's pride battled his need. Finally, barely audible, he muttered the words. She nodded once and handed him the glass of water. Something shifted inside him then. It felt strange. Not like winning. Not like losing. Like balance. From his office upstairs, Dacian watched through security monitors. At first he was furious. Who did this girl think she was? But as days passed, he noticed something he had not seen in years. His son laughed, not loudly, not arrogantly. Just once, when Mirela told him a simple story about her brothers racing paper boats in the rain. The laughter startled Dacian more than rebellion would have. He realized he could not remember the last time he had heard that sound from Viorel. It was lighter than the boy's usual voice, less guarded. That night, Dacian called Mirela into his study. The room smelled of leather and smoke. Their shelves of law books lined the walls, though everyone knew his power did not come from courts. She stood straight before his heavy desk. "You are bold," he said calmly. It was not praise, not yet. She met his eyes. "Children need boundaries," she replied, "even powerful ones." The courage in her tone was steady, not reckless. Dacian studied her carefully. Most people either feared him or desired something from him. She seemed to desire neither. "You think I failed him?" he asked quietly. It was the first honest question he had asked about his son in years. Mirela did not rush her answer. "I think you love him," she said, "but he does not know what that feels like." The words hung in the air like a challenge. For a second, the room felt smaller. Dacian could have dismissed her, fired her. Instead, he dismissed the guards and remained seated in silence long after she left. For the first time, someone had spoken to him not as a mafia boss, but as a father, and it unsettled him deeply. Down the corridor, unseen by both of them, a senior guard named Soren watched Mirela leave the study. His expression darkened. Change inside a powerful house creates cracks, and cracks invite ambition. Soren had served the Dragomir family for years. He did not like the influence this waitress was gaining. Not over the boy, and certainly not over the boss. What no one realized yet was that Viorel's transformation was not the only storm forming inside those walls. Someone else was paying attention, and not for the right reasons. The morning the storm rolled over Valdrin Harbor, the sea looked like torn steel. That wind pressed against the tall windows of the Dragomir estate, making them hum softly. Inside, Viorel sat at the long breakfast table, swinging his legs beneath the chair. He held a spoon but did not eat. Across from him, two businessmen spoke in low voices with his father. Words like shipment and border drifted through the air, heavy and adult. Viorel hated those words. They stole his father away even when he was physically present. He pushed his bowl slightly. Not enough to spill it, just enough to make a sound. No one reacted. His jaw tightened. The old anger began to rise. Then, Mirela stepped quietly beside him and placed a folded napkin in his lap. "Storms are loud today," she whispered gently. "But we don't have to be." He looked at her, confused by the softness. She did not scold him. She did not ignore him. She simply noticed. and that noticing felt warmer than the expensive room. Viorel lowered his spoon into the porridge and took a small bite. Across the table, Dacian saw it. He saw the restraint, the effort, and something in his chest tightened. He ended the meeting sooner than usual. The businessman left quickly, sensing his shift in mood. Silence settled. For once, it was not heavy. It was almost calm. Later that afternoon, thunder cracked above the estate. Viorel ran down a hallway chasing the echo, laughing as lightning flashed beyond the glass. A servant hurried after him, warning him not to run indoors. The boy ignored her and skidded around a corner, colliding with a small marble statue. It toppled. The crash echoed sharply. The servant gasped and stepped back in fear. Everyone knew that statue had belonged to Dacian's late wife. Actually, the only photograph of her stood nearby. Viorel froze. The laughter drained from his face. He had not meant to break it. He had not even thought. Fear crept in slowly. Not fear of punishment, fear of disappointing someone. Mirela arrived moments later. She took in the broken marble, the trembling servant, and the pale boy. "Are you hurt?" she asked first. Not about the statue, about him. He shook his head. His lip quivered, but he forced it still. "It was an accident," she said firmly to the servant. "Accidents are not crimes." The servant looked relieved but unsure. Footsteps approached. Slow. Heavy. Dacian appeared at the end of the corridor. His eyes moved from the shattered statue to his son. The air tightened. Viorel braced himself. This was the moment he usually covered mistakes with arrogance. But this time, he did not. "I broke it," he said quietly. The words were small but steady. Mirela felt pride bloom inside her chest. Dacian's expression did not change immediately. He walked forward, shoes echoing against stone. He crouched before his son, picking up a piece of marble in his large hand. "It cannot be repaired," he said calmly. Viorel nodded, tears threatening now. "I know." The confession was honest. Raw. Dacian studied him for a long second. Then he placed the marble aside. "Then, we will remember her without it." His voice was softer than the thunder outside. He placed a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. Mirela felt her breath catch. That small gesture meant more than shouting ever could. Viorel leaned into the touch before realizing it, then quickly straightened. But the moment had already happened. Soren watched from the staircase, jaw tight. Hey, the boy was changing. And worse, the boss was softening. Power built on fear does not survive softness easily. That night, as rain hammered against the estate windows, Soren made a quiet phone call. His voice was low, controlled. "The heir is distracted," he said, "and the boss is vulnerable." He did not mention the waitress by name, but his tone made it clear. The first crack had formed, and someone intended to widen it. The call Soren made that stormy night did not echo loudly. It did not need to. In Valderin Harbor, power moved in whispers, long before it moved in bullets. The man on the other end of the line was named Ilarion Voss, a rival who had waited years for weakness inside the Dragomir Empire. Soren did not betray openly. He simply offered information. "The boy is changing," he said quietly. "The boss is distracted." Ilarion did not laugh. He only breathed slowly, like a wolf scenting blood in winter. "Then we will test how deep that distraction runs," he replied. By morning, the harbor air felt heavier, though no one inside the estate knew why. Mirela sensed tension before she saw it. Staff moved more carefully. Guards doubled at the gates. Dacian's phone rang often, his voice colder than usual when he answered. Yet inside the dining room, Viorel was focused on a different mission. He was building a small wooden boat from a kit Mirela had found in storage. His fingers struggled with the tiny nails. He almost snapped at her when the hammer slipped. Almost. Instead, he inhaled the way she had taught him. Slow. Count to 3. Try again. She watched with quiet pride as he steadied his hand. "Strong is not loud," she reminded gently. He nodded, repeating the words like a secret spell. Upstairs, Dacian stood by the window of his study, staring at the gray sea. Reports had arrived that one of his shipments had been intercepted. Too precise to be random, too quiet to be coincidence. Someone inside his circle was speaking. His instinct was to tighten control, increase fear, remind everyone who he was. That was how power survived. Yet when he looked down into the courtyard and saw his son kneeling beside Mirela, carefully sanding the edge of the wooden boat, his certainty faltered. For the first time in years, he saw Viorel as a child instead of an heir. And that softened something dangerous inside him. That afternoon, the test came. A black car without license plates crashed through the outer gate. Guards responded instantly. Shouts filled the courtyard. Mirela grabbed Viorel's hand before he could even understand the danger. The sound of gunfire cracked through the air like splitting wood. Viorel's small fingers tightened around hers. Fear, real fear, surged through him. Not the fear others felt around him, his own. Mirela pulled him behind a stone fountain as security forced the attackers back. Her heart pounded, but her voice stayed steady. "Stay low," she whispered. "Breathe." He obeyed without argument. Dacian emerged moments later, fury sharp in every step. The attackers fled as quickly as they had come. It had been a message, not a massacre. He scanned the courtyard and saw his son crouched beside Mirela, her body slightly shielding his. Something fierce and protective rose inside him. Not just toward the boy, toward her. When the danger passed, Viorel did not run to the guards. He did not boast. He clung briefly to Mirela's sleeve before catching himself. Dacian approached slowly. "Are you hurt?" he asked his son. Viorel shook his head, then surprised everyone by stepping forward. They were loud, he admitted. Honest. Small. That night, after Viorel finally slept, Dacian found Mirela in the quiet kitchen. The lights were dim. The estate felt different now. Exposed. "You protected him," he said. It was not a question. She wiped her hands on a cloth. "He's a child," she replied simply. Dacian stepped closer, the air between them charged but quiet. "And you are brave," he said. This time, it was not observation. It was admiration. Outside, somewhere beyond the walls, enemies prepared their next move. Inside, something far more dangerous was happening. A feared Mafia boss was beginning to care for a woman who did not fear him. And that kind of vulnerability could either save a family or destroy it. The attack at the gates did not leave bullet holes in the estate walls for long. Repairs were made quickly. Marble was replaced. Iron was reinforced. But something invisible had already shifted. Dacian Dragomir doubled security, tightened routes, and questioned every guard personally. Now his voice returned to its colder edge. Orders were sharp again. Meetings lasted late into the night. Yet even as he restored control, one thought followed him like a shadow. They had attacked during daylight, during a moment when his son was outside. That was not coincidence, it was calculation. Someone knew his routines. Someone inside was speaking. Viorel felt the change too. The courtyard where he had built his wooden boat now felt watched. Guards stood closer. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. He did not fully understand betrayal, but he understood tension. It made his stomach hurt. That evening, he found Mirela in the garden, trimming dying roses. "Are they coming back?" he asked quietly, glancing toward the gates. She looked at him carefully. "Maybe," she answered honestly. "But you are safe." He searched her face. Because of my father?" She hesitated only a second. "Because of many things. And because you are learning how to be strong in the right way." Upstairs, Dacian studied surveillance footage repeatedly. Patterns emerged. A guard missing from his post. A delayed response. Soren's face appeared more than once where it should not have. Dacian did not react publicly. He had built an empire by observing before striking. That night, he called Soren into his study. The room was quiet, heavy with unspoken knowledge. "You have served me for years," Dacian said evenly. Soren nodded, confident in his performance. "Loyalty is everything," Dacian continued. "Without it, power rots from the inside." Soren held his gaze. My loyalty has never wavered. The lie was smooth. Before Dacian could respond, a sudden crash echoed from downstairs, and a scream followed. Not loud, not panicked. Sharp, and cut short. Dacian moved instantly, descending the staircase 2 steps at a time. In the main hall, a heavy chandelier swayed violently above the marble floor. One of its support chains had snapped. Glass shards scattered like ice. Beneath it, Mirela stood frozen, shielding Viorel with her body. If she had not pulled him back a second earlier, the falling metal would have crushed him. The timing was too precise, too perfect. This was no accident. Dacian's eyes lifted slowly to the balcony above, where Soren had been moments before. Rage, unlike any he had felt in years, burned through him. Not the cold anger of business, the hot fury of a father. Guards dragged Soren into the hall within minutes. He denied everything, but fear finally cracked his composure. Dacian did not shout. He did not threaten. His voice was deadly calm. You endangered my son. That was the only charge that mattered. Soren was taken away before the night ended. His betrayal confirmed. His alliance with Ilarion exposed. The Empire would survive. But Dacian knew something else now. His enemies had targeted the boy because they sensed softness, because they sensed love. Later, when the estate fell silent, Dacian found Mirela sitting beside Viorel's bed. The child clutched the small wooden boat even in sleep. You should not have to risk your life for us, Dacian said quietly. She looked up, eyes tired but steady. He is not a weapon, she replied. He is a child. The words cut deeper than accusation. Dacian stepped closer, lowering his voice. And what am I? The question hung between them, vulnerable in a way he had never allowed before. Mirela did not answer immediately. She simply met his gaze. You are a father who is learning, she said softly. And for the first time in years, Dacian Dragomir did not feel feared. He felt seen. The next morning, the Dragomir estate felt quieter than usual. The walls held a memory of last night's chaos. Broken chandelier, scattered glass, betrayal in the form of Soren's plotting. But life had to continue. Viorel, small and wide-eyed, ran into the kitchen where Mirela was already arranging trays for breakfast. He carried his wooden boat, slightly warped from the night's scare, and set it down with care. I don't want anyone to hurt it, he said, his voice small but firm. Mirela smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Then protect it carefully, she told him. And remember, strength is knowing when to act, not when to shout. He nodded, absorbing every word as if it were a secret spell. Dacian watched from the doorway, the silhouette of his broad frame framed by morning light spilling over marble floors. And something about the way Mirela spoke to his son unsettled him. Not because she challenged authority, she did gently, but because the boy listened. And for the first time, Dacian felt a quiet admiration for her. This was not defiance. It was teaching, real influence. He realized then that the Empire's foundation, fear, could never reach the same depth as care, patience, and quiet courage. He studied Mirela closely, noting how she moved through the hall like she belonged, though everyone knew her place was far below his own. Later, Viorel attempted to replicate the lesson she taught him, the night before the storm. He carefully built another small boat under her watchful gaze. Each nail he hammered with deliberate patience. Each edge he sanded with focused care. When a plank warped, he did not scream. He did not throw it. He looked at Mirela. She uncertain, and she only nodded once, silently encouraging him. The simplicity of her guidance, a single nod, a calm word, worked more than any lecture. Dacian could not look away. He felt a stirring he hadn't recognized before. Desire mixed with respect, caution mixed with fascination. A powerful woman who did not fear him, who understood his son, had entered his carefully constructed world. Outside the estate walls, the harbor whispered of threats. Ilarion Voss had not forgotten the failed strike. He plotted another attempt, subtler, using intrigue instead of force. Dacian's guards remained vigilant, but he trusted only one pair of eyes now, the ones that belonged to Mirela. He had begun to seek her opinion quietly, sometimes when the boy was asleep, sometimes while reviewing shipment manifests. Each time, he realized he valued her judgment more than he should admit. She was not just protecting his son, she was guiding him, shaping him into someone who might survive a world ruled by men like Ilarion. And with every answer she offered, Dacian's fascination deepened, subtly threading desire into the growing respect. By evening, the storm outside had passed, leaving the harbor slick and dark. Viorel, asleep at last, clutched his boat like a talisman. Mirela sat nearby, exhausted but unbowed. Dacian approached quietly, standing at the edge of the small chair where she had settled. He spoke softly, almost too softly for her to hear. "You've changed him." She looked up, not startled, but cautious. "I haven't changed him," she corrected. "I've only helped him see what he already could be." His eyes lingered on her longer than necessary, and for the first time, he felt exposed. Not as a boss, but as a man. A man who realized that a poor girl from the South District had touched more than his son's life. She had touched his heart. Outside, the estate remained calm, but inside, the quiet stirred a storm that neither of them yet fully understood. Weeks passed, and the Dragomir estate began to hum with a fragile rhythm. Viorel had learned small lessons of patience, honesty, and care under Mirela's gentle guidance. He no longer screamed when frustrated. He no longer demanded attention with tantrums, and he smiled more freely. Dacian noticed these subtle changes, and each day he found himself drawn to Mirela's quiet authority, her strength that came without shouting, without fear. He began to seek her opinion on matters beyond the boy, now from the layout of security rotations to the timing of shipments. She offered insight without overstepping, never flattering, never demanding. And that discretion made her irresistible. But peace inside the walls was always a fragile illusion. Soren's betrayal had not been the only threat. Ilarion Voss had found a new way to strike, manipulating rumors among the lower staff and testing loyalties, probing for weakness in the family. One evening, a forged message arrived for Dacian, a claim that Mirela had been bribed by Ilarion, that her kindness was a facade masking treachery. Dacian's first impulse was to confront her with suspicion, to demand proof, to exert control. But he stopped. He had learned something in the months since the broken plate. Not all challenges were met with fear. Sometimes they were met with observation, so he watched silently, waiting. Mirela, unaware of the whispered accusations, continued her work, carrying Viorel on errands through the estate, teaching him to pour tea, tie knots, and manage his temper. The boy had begun to look forward to her lessons with something close to admiration. Dacian observed from shadows, noting her patience, her resilience, and with each passing moment, he realized that his feelings for her were no longer limited to respect. They were fascination, attraction, and perhaps something deeper, unspoken. Yet the rumors lingered like shadows, waiting to test the loyalty of both heart and household. The tension escalated the next morning. A minor accident in the kitchen, a spilled tray, a startled guard, was exaggerated by whispers and interpreted as sabotage. Dacian confronted Mirela privately in the estate's private library. Bookshelves lined every wall, the air heavy with the scent of leather and smoke. His voice was low, deliberate. "I hear things about you," he said, watching her closely. "Rumors, lies, betrayal." Mirela looked up calmly, her hands folded, shoulders squared. "I serve this house with honesty," she said simply. "If there are whispers, they are not mine to answer." Her calmness and unwavering gaze struck him harder than any confrontation could have. In that moment, Dacian realized he could trust her more than anyone in his empire, even more than himself. Later, he found her near Viorel's small bed, sitting on the floor beside him as he slept, brushing back strands of hair from his forehead. The child's breaths were slow and even, untroubled by nightmares. And Dacian stepped closer, quietly, without announcing himself. He watched the tender moment unfold between caregiver and boy, the intimacy and strength combined in one person who feared neither the family's power nor its legacy. A flicker of something unexpected ignited inside him. Desire, admiration, gratitude. He had been a man of control for decades, but Mirela's bravery, intelligence, and care challenged every instinct he had relied on for survival. And for the first time, Dacian Dragomir wondered if love might be as powerful as fear. The night air hung thick with the scent of salt and smoke. Valdrin Harbor was restless. Ships rocked against their moorings like uneasy beasts. Inside the Dragomir estate, the chandeliers glimmered under heavy tension. Viorel had been tucked into bed, but sleep did not come easily. He sensed the quiet unease in the house, the whispers he could not fully understand. Mirela stayed close, brushing his hair back, whispering gentle reassurances, keeping him calm. She was the only constant in a world that had suddenly shifted. Outside, shadows moved faster, darker, sharper, and Dacian knew the danger was near. It came suddenly. A group of masked men, coordinated and silent, stormed the outer gates. The alarm screamed through the stone halls, echoing like a warning. Guards rushed to intercept them, but Ilarion Voss had sent skilled men, trained to bypass standard defenses. Fire erupted in the courtyard, the scent of smoke and gunpowder filling the halls. Dacian's mind went cold, every instinct trained over decades snapping into action. But the first thought in his heart was of the boy, Viorel. He ran faster than he had in years, toward his son's room. Mirela had anticipated this. With calm precision, she grabbed Viorel's hand and led him through a hidden corridor beneath the estate. She ducked and pressed him behind stone walls as bullets shattered doors and splintered wood. Viorel's small body shook, but he did not cry. Instead, he listened to her voice, steady, instructing, anchoring him in a world suddenly violent. Dacian arrived in the chaos moments later, moving like a shadow of authority and wrath. He saw the intruders scattering toward the central hall, the protective positioning of Mirela shielding his son, and something fierce ignited within him. Not just rage, but a burning realization of how much he depended on her courage. They fought their way through the estate. Dacian took down the first attacker with brutal precision. Mirela used knowledge of the hallways to guide Viorel, dodging danger, moving swiftly. The boy clutched her sleeve, watching her with wide, trusting eyes. And then, in the main hall, a masked figure lunged at Viorel. Without hesitation, Mirela pushed the boy behind herself, taking the blow against her shoulder. Pain flared, but she gritted her teeth and stood, holding her ground. Dacian's fury broke completely. He moved like a storm, striking down the remaining intruders with lethal efficiency. After the chaos, silence fell, and smoke rose in ribbons through the broken windows. Guards tended to wounds, assessed damage. Dacian knelt beside Mirela, seeing blood on her shoulder. He did not speak at first. His hands trembled slightly as he touched her arm. "You saved him," he said, voice tight, barely a whisper. She nodded, refusing to flinch under his gaze. "I did what needed to be done," she replied. Then, as if the moment demanded honesty, she looked into his eyes. "He trusts me. That's all that matters." Dacian stared at her, understanding then more than he had ever allowed himself to feel. Protecting a child had brought them together in ways danger alone could not create. And in that moment, desire, admiration, and something deeper intertwined. They had survived the night, but nothing inside the Dragomir estate, or in their hearts, would ever be the same. No morning light spilled over the Dragomir estate like gold, washing away shadows. The night's chaos had left its mark. Broken windows, splintered wood, and bruised egos. But the true scars were invisible. Viorel sat cross-legged on the polished floor, holding his repaired wooden boat, a triumphant smile on his small face. He had not only survived the attack, but learned something vital. Fear could no longer dictate his life. He looked at Mirela, who knelt beside him, her hands steady as always, and he realized she had taught him more than obedience. She had taught him courage, patience, and respect. For the first time, the boy felt powerful without being cruel. Dacian entered the room quietly, watching the scene unfold. Something inside him softened as he observed the bond between his son and Mirela. He approached, crouching slightly to meet Viorel's eyes. "Do you understand why she protects you?" he asked. Viorel nodded solemnly. "Because she cares," he said. Dacian's chest tightened. It was a simple truth, but one that carried weight heavier than any throne or fortune. He reached out to place a hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the child lean slightly into his father's warmth. For the first time, the room held balance instead of tension. Fear had been replaced by trust. Later, Mirela and Dacian met alone in the estate's study, the air quiet and heavy with the aftermath of danger. He studied her, admiration etched in every line of his face. "You stayed calm when I could not," he said softly. "When my guards failed, when my enemies attacked, you kept him safe." Morela's eyes, tired but unwavering, met his. I only did what was right," she replied. "For him, and for this family." Dacian's lips curved slightly, and he felt a surge of something he had long denied. Longing. Her bravery, her strength, and her quiet defiance had undone the walls he had built around himself. I need you here," he admitted. "Not just for him. For me." She paused, then nodded slowly, a smile touching her lips. "Then, I am here." Over the following weeks, the Dragomir estate transformed. Viorel's tantrums became rare, replaced with laughter and curiosity. He learned to tie his shoes, pour tea, and care for small tasks under Mirela's guidance, each lesson reinforced by gentle correction instead of fear. Dacian observed from the shadows at first, then began participating, sharing small moments with both of them. And the household staff whispered about the change. The feared boss now softened, the heir behaving with unexpected humility, and the girl who had entered their lives now shaping the family's future. Dacian and Mirela's quiet companionship grew steadily, built on trust, shared experience, and the unspoken love forged in trials they had faced together. The final test came not from rivals, but from life itself. Ilarion Voss attempted one last strike, sending word of an ambush that never materialized. Dacian, confident now in both his son and Mirela, calmly countered the threat, demonstrating that courage and love had created an unbreakable team. Standing in the grand courtyard afterward, Dacian turned to Mirela, his hand brushing hers. Viorel laughed between them, small but fearless, holding his wooden boat aloft like a flag. Dacian knew. Finally, that strength was not built on fear or domination. It was built on loyalty, care, and the courage to love. And in that knowledge, the family, once fractured by pride and power, was whole. Outside the estate, the harbor gleamed in the morning sun, the waves reflecting a future neither entirely safe nor entirely predictable. But inside, the Dragomirs had learned something far more important: that true power could be gentle, love could be fierce, and a poor girl who dared to humble a boy had changed the course of their lives forever. Viorel looked at both of them, wide-eyed and smiling. Dacian took Mirela's hand, silent words passing between them. And together, father, son, and the woman who had become the heart of their home faced the world, stronger, united, and unafraid.